Good morning, all. Welcome to our Adult Sunday School class for the second Sunday of March 2024. Going through the Bible timeline, we are after the age of the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and Job, and are gearing up for the Exodus. We are picking up in Exodus chapter 2. Screen share going here. Getting some timeline stuff from Egyptologist David Roll and his new chronology for Egypt and those other nations affected by Egypt's timeline. Of course, the Bible's our ultimate authority and resource for everything. So we are in where we left off, the year of 1446 BC. So this is Middle Bronze Age, level 2A. Over in China, they're being led by Emperor Taiwu of their Shang Dynasty, second dynasty after the Xia Dynasty. Egypt is being led by Pharaoh Mer-Nefer I. Let's see, so he is down here. This is from the cap of his pyramid, which apparently was over their small pyramid over in the Avaris area. So here is the top, the Ben stone of the pyramid where he is making an offering to Horus there. There's a symbol of life, the Ankh. There's another horse falcon up there. So this is the Pharaoh who, when Moses killed the Egyptian and then was rebuked by a fellow Hebrew and Moses was on the run, this is the Pharaoh that wanted to kill Moses. So, and he's in Egypt's 13th dynasty during their second intermediate period. So it's after the high point of unified Egypt in the Middle Kingdom with Joseph's pharaohs. And we're not yet to the New Kingdom with a united Egypt under their high point with pharaohs such as King Tut and Ramses and all that. That's all yet to come. Over in Mesopotamia, being under the nation of Babylon, led by Samsu-Iluna, who's the son of Hammurabi. With the Lord's folks over in Egypt, in the line of Christ, through the tribe of Judah, we have Ram, who I put at about 117 years old right now. His son Amminadab, about 58 years old. So let's refresh and pick up Exodus chapter 2. Verse 15, and now I'll insert the Pharaoh's name here to remind us. Exodus 2:15. When Pharaoh, this Pharaoh here, heard about this matter, he tried to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the presence of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he dwelt above the well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. Then the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. When they came to their father, Reuel, he said, "Why have you come back so soon today?" They said, "An Egyptian saved us from the shepherds. And what is more, he even drew water for us and watered the flock." So he said to his daughters, "Where is he then? Why is it that you have left the man behind? Invite him to have something to eat." So Moses has come across from Egypt, across the Sinai Peninsula, over into Saudi Arabia, and now in Midian. So in spite of being hardened, this is from David Roll, being hardened by his military campaigns and his travel time in the wilderness, this 40-year-old refugee from Pharaoh's wrath, imagine he's probably pretty exhausted when he finally reaches the territory of the Midianites. So he basically sets up shop here. Now it's time to think about, as we've talked about, his Cushite wife that he left behind, his friends that he left behind in Egypt. So what's going to happen now? Keep in mind, too, the disappointment, as we read from Acts chapter 7, the expectation that his own fellow Hebrews understood that God was granting deliverance here. But as Stephen proclaims, they did not understand. And again, as Stephen proclaims, Moses was very proficient in speech and in other areas as well. So this was a big setback. Now, who knows what's going to happen? Moses certainly does not. So this brings us to, let's see. So we're going to, as we go on the Exodus setup, we're going to depart from David Roll, who doesn't completely follow the Bible on this, and go with Dr. Glenn Fritz, who definitely sticks closer to the Bible on this part. So let's see. One of the things he mentions is that Moses had firsthand experience with the Gulf of Aqaba, having passed its northern shore in his exile travel to Midian. So here's the Gulf of Aqaba here, the Red Sea further south. This comes off of the Red Sea, Suez Canal over on the other side of the Sinai Peninsula. So Moses would have come across the top and come down here to Midian. Most likely in this area, Nuna and Asharma, and we'll talk about those things in a moment. So this area of Midian, most authorities recognize that ancient Midian is south of modern Jordan. It's east of the Gulf of Aqaba, and this is in the northwest part of the land of Saudi Arabia. So by the way, just as a size comparison, here is Saudi Arabia laid over the United States. Yeah. And so Saudi Arabia goes from Billings to Little Rock. And the area we're talking about with Midian and where Mount Sinai and all that stuff will be is that little section right there, that part. Yeah. Dr. Fritz makes the observation, we don't know 100% if Moses traveled on foot, used animals, was accompanied by other people. There are a couple of different writers who talk about this. Around the year 93, Josephus said that Moses went away privately because the public roads were watched. He took his flight through the deserts, where his enemies could not suspect he would travel. And though he was destitute of food, he went on, despised that difficulty courageously, and he came to Midian off the Red Sea there. There's another guy in 923, so 9 centuries later, keep in mind, Arab historian at Tabari, he says this: Moses departed from Egypt to Midian, distance of 9 night encampments. Having no food, he lived on the leaves of perennials, journeyed barefoot. He reached Midian with lacerated feet, according to that guy. So that's interesting. Dr. Fritz makes the observation in the Bible, there's no record of where Moses resided in Egypt, but we know being in the household of Pharaoh, and Pharaoh having the 2 households, the one at Igitawe in their main capital, and then Avaris as their summer capital, where, of course, the bulk of the Hebrews were. It's very likely that Moses spent time in between both. But understanding that Goshen, that land area in the Nile Delta, the distance from there to Midian is about 325 miles from Avaris, which again, Avaris at the time was called Roerti, the mouth of the 2 ways, because the Nile kind of branches off there. So going with what that Arab guy says at Tabari, if there's any merit to that, 10 days travel would be about 32 miles a day. Now on foot, probably not likely, but the average day's travel by camel for caravans, there's what's called, now after Muslim times, it's called the Hajj route, where they go to make their pilgrimages to Mecca, Medina, and all that stuff. So when they travel by camel, they go about that distance daily in the 30 miles a day. So the distance estimate that he talks about, 9 night encampments at this rate, that actually fits with going from Avaris, Roerti, and Goshen over to Midian if he had access, was able to commandeer camels and make his way. Another observation, we touched on this a little bit, Sister Diana's question. Jethro, the name of Moses' soon-to-be father-in-law. The name Jethro means excellency, indicating that that was more of a title. Rule, his name that's given in a couple verses later, means friend of God. So, and in Numbers, it's called Ragul, Ragul. So it looks like Jethro is his title. It means excellency. His actual name was probably Ragul, meaning friend of God. What else we got? So zooming back in here on Midian. So he'd have come across the northern area here. Of course, Exodus crossing down here, but he would have come across the north, ended up in this area. Here's what we see now, which isn't a whole lot. You see the wind erosion. Doesn't look like much of a place to set up camp today. Yeah, too. Good point. Very good point. Yeah, exactly. There you go. So down in this area here, we're talking here. So this area, Ainuna, it means eye of water. It's an ancient oasis settlement. It actually was surrounded by gardens of palm trees, had a large wadi or a brook that would come and go, that had the same name, the Wadi Ainuna. So it can be reasoned that Ainuna and Sharma, of course, this is going off of Dr. Glenn Fritz here, they would have been attractive for several reasons. Having the coastal advantage of climate, sea trade, and fishing, a local caravan route, ample fresh water, and access to the interior highlands. Regarding the climate, this Sharma area has been noted to have temperatures about 18 degrees cooler than the surrounding region. So it had some pluses going for it. So the attributes of this Ainuna area definitely favor it as a habitation for Jethro and Moses. And some medieval writers refer to this Ainuna area as Midian. So ancient Midian at one time could have supported large human and animal populations because it had substantially greater vegetation levels back then. Now, so far so good. Any reactions, thoughts, questions?
Some fresh water because you wouldn't have the ocean water.
Yeah.
I don't see the rivers.
They didn't have our modern desalination plants. Desalination, yeah, exactly. Now, something we touched on last week, I just want to go back over real quick. Exodus 2:15. Most of your Bibles probably say, here's a traditional Exodus 2:15 translations. They actually shortchange what happened here in this scenario. So here's the verse kind of highlighting how it's normally written. He dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. But the literal translation actually from the Hebrew says, he dwelt in the land of Midian, and he dwelt above the well. So what's the difference? Where it says he dwelt in the land, and then he sat down by a well, dwelt and sat down, it's the same word in Hebrew, yeshev. And there's really no reason to change its meaning, to translate it differently in one time and not the other, and to call it sitting in one and not the other. So there's also a Hebrew preposition in there, al, that means above. And it says, and the translations sometimes say a well instead of the well. So when we clear that up, Moses is more accurately portrayed residing above a specific well, probably a place overlooking the chief water source of the area, a common landmark. So the verse, especially in the Hebrew, doesn't require that his dwelling is immediately adjacent to the well or that he was just there a short time, before the next scene happened. So after Moses got himself settled and situated, then it was a bit later that we have the next event with the priest of Midian having 7 daughters who came to the well. And then that got Moses's attention. Because the way it kind of reads is that Moses made it to the well, crashed, and then he was woken up by this ruckus with these ladies and the shepherds and fussing over the well. Not exactly what it says in the Hebrew, so I just wanted to clear that up a little bit. Does it matter in the big scheme of things? No, but just kind of getting a little more closer to what's actually said here, being more true to that. So, if this place was a little more lush then than it is now, what happened? Well, we do know some things. When World War I began in 1914, this was all under the Ottoman Turks, just like we talked on Wednesday nights, how the land of Israel was under the Ottoman Turks for 400 years, starting with Selim the Grim in 1517 until 1917, World War I, when the Ottomans were booted out. So World War I began in 1914. The Allies, they had blockades that prevented the replenishment of the roads in Saudi Arabia and their coal stocks. So the Ottomans under Turkey, they desperately needed this railroad for their war effort. Turkey was with the Axis powers. World War I was the Allies, well, also World War II too. But Turkey was with those opposed to what we refer to as the Allies here. So in order to get their locomotive fuel and timbers for the sleepers, entire forests were felled in the vicinity of Salt and Yarmouk in the nation of Jordan, and fruit trees and over 22,000 acres of olive trees. In 1915, a branch line for the railroad was built out to the Hisheh forest in the Jordan Mountains north of Petra. Wood was cut and shipped over to Medina in Arabia. Now, wood supplies 30% less heat than coal. So you need a great deal more wood to get the same amount of heat. Yeah. So, and another note, other than Lawrence of Arabia track dynamiting exploits, we have little record of what transpired in the area to keep the trains running during World War I. But by February of 1918, we kind of see the end results. Many of the houses in Medina had been stripped of wood to provide locomotive fuel. Yeah. Yeah. So, hey, when you got a war to fight, you got a war to fight, right?
You know, the trees and vegetation and all that grew there. Why did, it makes you wonder why it, it didn't continue after it started fresh, just transparent.
Yeah, I guess there was, they yanked things out so effectively that there wasn't anything left to replant and regrow or reseed. Not like picking a dandelion and then blowing it and getting more weeds, but yeah.
Well, just like, we get a fire in the mountains.
Yeah.
Destroys timber, there's still got rain, you still got
Exactly.
ecosystem go along that there would be regrowth.
Yeah, the difference there is you still have the burnt remains that become part of the nutrient package that goes into the regrowth. Well, here they cut everything down and took it out.
Yeah.
So it's like basically ripped out of there. And so the place was kind of left stripped and barren. Yeah.
In a natural forest, even if there was, well, whether there's a fire or not a fire, there's going to be stuff on the ground and dropped from the trees and
Yeah.
keeps the ground amended to be nice soil.
Right on.
Whereas these guys hauled everything away and there was not nice soil.
There you go. Yeah. So we see some of that. We see some of that. So we have the ruckus now with that we read about with Jethro's daughters and the shepherds fussing over the well. Moses comes to the rescue. The daughters come back and tell dad, and dad's like, okay, so where is the guy? I'm like, oh yeah, in our excitement, guess we kind of left him behind. He's like,
Imagine that with all the daughters. Oh, we could use another
yeah.
man around here and some muscle.
Yeah.
So go get him.
There's a reference to a Hobab, which is pretty much understood to be Jethro's son. So, and that's the only other one mentioned. So 7 daughters and 1 son. So yeah, they could probably use a little more help around there. Hey, if he helped you guys out, and he can probably help be a benefit here. So yeah. Oh, I love it already.
It's all these daughters and smell sexy, but not Zipporah. She was the demure one.
In the movie?
No.
In Cecil B. DeMille's movie? Because that's how he wrote it.
So there's no biblical reference to the girls dancing.
No. Or Zipporah even being there. Yeah, because keep in mind, he once again has to leave family to go to across the desert, and then he brings the Israelites back. Zipporah doesn't, and his kids don't come with him when he goes back to Egypt. So let's see. So Moses finally gets a little comfort, and I can imagine Moses here after all that. Okay, so I kill the Egyptian who's harassing one of my fellows, and I get grief for that, and I get threatened and challenged over that. Now I'm on the run. So here I save these 7 damsels in distress from these big bad shepherds, and then they all bail. Hello, you're welcome. Feeling a little underappreciated here, Moses. And sometimes we need those humility checks and all that stuff. I'm not one who necessarily subscribes that Moses absolutely had an ego problem at this point, but if he did or did not, he definitely got some humbling life experiences here. So anyway, they do go grab him and bring him back. So Exodus 2:21. And Moses was willing to live with the man and he gave him his daughter Zipporah to Moses. Okay. So now by the next year, 1485 BC, the Israelites have now been enslaved for 60 years. They've been in Egypt for a lot longer, but the slavery and the enslavement started about 60 years ago now. 1485, about here or so, is where I put 1 Chronicles 2, verse 10. 1 Chronicles 2, verse 10, we get 1 Chronicles 2:10. Ram fathered Amminadab, and Amminadab fathered Nahshon, leader of the sons of Judah. So we've got Jacob, Judah by Tamar, Judah's daughter-in-law, widow of Judah's sons Ur and Onan. Perez, Hezron, and we got two sons of Hezron here, Ram, and then over here, Caleb. This is not the Caleb as in Caleb and Joshua. This is a different Caleb. And Caleb's married Ephrath and their son Hur. These would be the ancestors, founders of Bethlehem, Ephrathah, and all that stuff. So over on this side, in the line of Christ, remember the tribe of Judah, we got Perez, Hezron, Ram, Amminadab, and now Nahshon. And 1 Chronicles 2:10 mentions that Nahshon is the leader of the sons of Judah. When the tribes leave in the Exodus, each tribe has the leader of the tribe at that time. Nahshon, who's born about this time, would grow up to be the leader of the tribe of Judah. And he's in the line of Christ here. So I put his dad Amminadab at about 59 years old when he fathers Nahshon. Nahshon is the 28th generation of Adam. And looks like he's 36 generations from Christ through Joseph. We also have in this time frame, verse 27. Now see how there's a ram here? Hezron ram, Nahshon's grandpa ram. Well, we've got a different ram here because that's that ram there, but this is a different ram here. So again, Jacob, Judah, Perez, Hezron, Ram. We got his Ram's brother Jeremiel. We got that Caleb guy who's not our Caleb, Caleb and Joshua, Ashur, Segub. And then there's a daughter here that married the Joshua and Caleb over here. So Caleb marries into the family of Judah. And that'll all happen later. But not in the line of the Messiah Christ here. Over here, we have 1 Chronicles 2, verse 27. The sons of Ram, this Ram, not that Ram. The sons of this Ram were Ram, the firstborn of Jeremiel, were kind of hard to see over here, Maiz, Jamin, and Eker. So Jacob, Judah, Perez, Hezron, Jeremiel, not in the line of Christ, his son Ram, and then his kids over here. Again, Maiz, Jamin, and Eker. So they're born about this time frame. Because this is the line of Christ. Yeah. And last little section of 1 Chronicles 2 over in verses 50 and 51. We have, these are the sons of Caleb, the sons of Hur, the firstborn of Ephrathah. So, okay. So we've got Jacob, Judah, Perez, Hezron. Then we got over here Ram, the line of Christ, Jeremiel and his line that we saw with the other Ram. But now we are going over here. Caleb, the not Joshua and Caleb. This Caleb over here, by his wife Ephrathah, he has Hur, and Hur has these kids. So again, 1 Chronicles 2:50, these are the sons of Caleb. The sons of Hur, the firstborn of his mom, Ephrathah, were Shobal, the father or founder of Kiriath Jearim, Salma, the father or founder of Bethlehem, and Hareph, the founder or father of Beth Gader. Now, these men born around this time frame, they would be in the generation that dies in the wilderness, most likely. So these aren't the folks who lived in the younger generation to cross the Jordan with Joshua and be founders. So they're more likely fathers or ancestors, and it'd be their descendants who would be the ones to establish these cities that are being referenced here. So just showing where those cities came from and the family trees who established them. So at the time that Nahshon is born to Amminadab, his grandpa Ram would be about 118, and again, his father would be 59. And I'll ask the question as I asked before, how old was Nahshon at the time he was born? Crickets. How old was Nahshon at the time that Nahshon was born?
He was a person?
Yes.
Oh.
How old was he when he was born?
One day.
Zero?
Thank you. Okay, you're awake. Cool.
The zero.
0, yes. Right on.
Newborn.
Yeah.
That's even. Fourth is 1 year old.
Really?
Did you know that?
I did not know that.
They're all born on the 1st of January, right?
Horse racing, when they talk about the
Ah,
2-year-old.
Yeah.
Actually 3. They almost.
you know, right along those lines is how the kings of Israel and Judah were reckoned for their times on the throne. Because, yeah, normally a king dies and the next person takes over, right? Okay. You know that these kings, when they die, they don't conveniently do it on December 31st, or what the Hebrew equivalent of December 31st would be. It often happens in the middle of the year. So do you count, and we're too lazy, we don't like counting half years or 3/4 years. So they have what's called accession or non-accession years. And basically, and I kind of sometimes get them mixed up, basically, do you not count the half? In some cases, you don't count the half year, you just count the first full year. In other cases, the partial year is counted as a full year. And different nations between Israel and Judah, the split kingdom, did it different ways. And sometimes they switched. So you really have to kind of pay attention. Of course, at the time, they knew what they were talking about. So when this king reigned in that other king's 13th year, well, is that accession year or non-accession year? And lots of times they had, like we've seen with the pharaohs, dual reigns, where son would reign with a co-reign with the father for a while. So is that his year, is that his 14th year as a solo king? Or is that his 14th year counting his co-reigning with his dad? So you have to factor all these things in order to see it all fits and it all works. We just have to understand which case we're talking about as we go. So interesting about the horses, I did not know that. So yes, Nahshon was 0 when he was born, 0 years old. So we have one more birth that we definitely know is in this year, and that is the Caleb we're familiar with, the Caleb of Joshua and Caleb. This guy right here, Caleb, son of Jephunnah. We know Caleb has a brother named Kenaz, who would later have a son, Othniel, who will be the first judge in the book of Judges. So that's Caleb's nephew. But what's interesting here, Caleb is mentioned, he's the brother-in-law of Jeremiel, Ram, and the other Caleb. He marries into the family. So Caleb marries into the tribe of Judah. He's not naturally of the tribe of Judah. His father is Jephunnah, the Kenizzite. Kenizzites are not Hebrews. And so Caleb is actually a Gentile. Yeah. Yeah. He married into the faith. And obviously converted to the faith and obviously was very faithful, more so than some of the native born and all that stuff. So that's pretty spiffy. Next year, 1484 BC, we have a new king of Babylon, Abi-Eshuh, something like that. Took over from Samsu-Iluna, who was his father. So this guy on the throne now, Abi-Eshuh, is the grandson of Hammurabi. We know during his reign, he reigned 1484 to 1457, so a good little while. 2 aggressive military campaigns. In his 4th year, he subdued the army of the Kassites. They were a group that was involved there in Babylon. Chronicle of Early Kings recalls that he dammed up the Tigris River in an attempt that didn't work, trying to capture the founder of this other group of folks, the Sealand dynasty, their leader Elu Ma'ili, but damming up the Tigris didn't succeed in being able to capture the guy. Another group off to the east, the Elamites, where the book of Ruth takes place. What's in what used to be the land of Elam becomes Persia, and all that, like Iran does. Well, the Elamites under their king Kutir-Nahunte the first, they raid into Babylonia early in this guy's reign, the grandson of Hammurabi, and they sack 30 cities. So this guy wasn't exactly reigning over a time of a lot of peace. as Hammurabi's grandson. So we see Babylon is not able to maintain its greatness in the old Babylonian kingdom after the departure of Hammurabi. But this brings us back to the Bible, year 1483 BC or so, back to Exodus, chapter 2. Exodus 2, verse 22. Then she gave birth to a son and named him Gershom. For he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. So here we go. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Levi. Kohath has a sister named Jochebed. Kohath's son Amram marries his aunt Jochebed. They have Miriam, Aaron, and Moses. Moses marries Zipporah, daughter of Jethro of the Kenites. And so he's got 6 other daughters besides Zipporah and son Hobab. Moses marries Zipporah, have their firstborn Gershom, and there'll later be a secondborn son, Eliezer. And so Gershom means I'm a foreigner there. Eliezer means God is my protector. So these Midianites were wandering tribe of nomads, kind of settled in this area. And they actually come from Abraham through Abraham's son Midian, who was born to Abraham's wife Keturah after the passing of Sarah. And so the descendants of Midian had migrated down here. Abraham famously sends all his children out to the east while proclaiming that Isaac is the one who's going to be the inheritor of everything. And so that's how we get Midianites. And so the Midianites weren't under the subjection of Egypt like the Hebrews were. So they were there for Moses to come over to. So they have a connection and a recognition. As we read later on and see, wow, this guy Jethro, he kind of knows some things. Well, we can see where and why and how he knows some things spiritually and about the one true God. So by 1481 BC, the Israelites have now been in Egypt for 180 years. And again, it was mostly good, just not so much lately. By around 1479 BC, you've got another birth recorded. This is recorded in 1 Chronicles chapter 6. And all this, keep in mind, is counting us down to the Exodus, which starts with the burning bush beginning in chapter 3. So we're making our way to that. So right now, 1 Chronicles 6. I should have just stayed in 1 Chronicles myself. 1 Chronicles 6, there we are. 1 Chronicles 6, verse 42. Page back. We have in this line here, Jacob, Levi, and Levi, again, the 3 divisions, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. We have Moses through and Aaron and Miriam through Kohath. Over here, through Gershon, we've got this line down here. So we're going to read, and it's counting backwards. So 1 Chronicles 6:42, the son of Ethan, Joah, Ethan right here. He's called different things in different passages. Son of Ethan, the son of Zimmah, the son of Shimei, and then goes on backwards up the line through there. So this guy's born, Zimmah is about 48 years old in this line of the Levites here. So these 3 divisions of the Levites, they've got their different responsibilities when it comes to the tabernacle and then the temple from there. So that line is continuing. So certainly, as we've seen, when the Bible talks about the population growth, yeah, we see we've got a lot of these names here. Let's see. Counting down by 1478 BC. It's now been 110 years or so since the events of the book of Job. And Job is still alive while all this other stuff is going on. By 1475 BC, the Israelites have now been enslaved for 70 years. Probably around this time, we have another birth worth mentioning. A guy by the name of Korah. He's infamous for what's known as Korah's rebellion. named after him, which will take place a little later on in the wilderness journey. So we've got Jacob, Levi, Kohath, Kohath's brother Amram, Kohath's son Amram, Amram's brother Izhar. So Amram had Miriam, Aaron, who married, we'll get to that, Aaron and Moses. And so Moses's uncle Izhar, Amram's brother, Moses' uncle Izhar, also known as Amminadab, has sons down here, starting with Korah, and then Nepheg and Zikri are mentioned. So these folks are having kids much later in life. Izhar could have been as old as 97 when he fathered Korah. So there's kind of a big stretch here. Later generations will be having kids more frequently. But yeah, Korah will be part of the generation that dies in the wilderness. He doesn't die of natural causes, though. He has his rebellion against his cousin Moses. And we'll get to that when we get to that. So he would be born somewhere in this time frame. 1471 BC. Israelites have now been in Egypt 190 years. Somewhere in here, maybe 1469 BC, Aaron marries Elisheba. Who is Elisheba? She is the sister of Nahshon, who's in the line of Christ, in the tribe of Judah. So we have the Levites, and we have the tribe of Levi and the tribe of Judah now intermarried. So the Aaron would be the first high priest. His later son Eleazar would be the next high priest. So the second high priest has half Levite blood and half Judah blood. And so we see that in Jesus, we have the fulfillment of the roles of priest and king. And so they're coming together here. We know that Mary is a descendant of the Levites here because she's related to Elizabeth and her husband, who are Levites as well under that tribe. So this is all kind of connected here. By 1468 BC, it's now been about 120 years since the events of Job. He's still alive. This brings us back to Exodus chapter 2. So remember, Pharaoh I put a death warrant out on Moses. So Moses had, understandably, bailed. Jump ship and head across the desert. So we're going to pick up in Exodus 2, verse 23. Now it came about in the course of those many days that the king of Egypt died. That would be Pharaoh I, the Pharaoh who in verse 15 had issued the death warrant on Moses. So that Pharaoh is now dead. And the sons of Israel groaned because of the bondage, and they cried out. And their cry for help because of their bondage ascended to God. So God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And God saw the sons of Israel, and God took notice of them. This is now under the new Pharaoh after the death of Ai. This is Pharaoh Sobekhotep VI. This guy here. So by the time that Pharaoh I was buried in his mud pyramid over in Avaris, Moses has now been with Jethro and the Midianites for almost 20 years. So two sons now, Gershom and Eliezer, growing up into manhood. Moses is aiming towards 60 years old. He got beard growing and all that stuff. And he still got a little more time before God calls him out of here. Sobekhotep VI rules from 1467 to 1466 BC. Not very long-range pharaoh. We have after him new pharaoh in 1466 named Sankhenre Sewadtju. I'm glad this is all written down because. So he reigns from the city of Memphis in Egypt. He reigned from 1466 to 1464 BC. Not very long. He ruled at a time in Egypt when that 13th dynasty, their control over Egypt is starting to recede. Not going too well. It's also about this time, 1466 BC. By the way, we're 20 years from the Exodus. That we have Eleazar born that we mentioned. Levi, Kohath, Amram married his aunt Jochebed. They had Moses, who married Zipporah, had sons Gershom, Eleazar. Well, Amram's firstborn son, Aaron, has a son named Eleazar. So Aaron and Moses both have sons named Eleazar, just spelt a little differently. And the line of the high priests would come through him. So I put Aaron at about 63 years old when he fathers Eleazar. And this is recorded a few places in scripture for us. Exodus chapter 6, which deals a lot with the high priest line here. Exodus 6, verse 23. Exodus 6:23. Aaron married Elisheba, the daughter of Amminadab, the sister of Nahshon, and she bore him Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar and Ithamar. Nadab and Abihu will have a famous episode relating to actions on their parts, and Eleazar and Ithamar will actually later on see a split with the high priest, a line from Ithamar and a line from Eleazar, and we'll see a restoration that takes place there. Numbers mentions this too. Numbers 26, verse 60. Numbers 26:60. And to Aaron were born Nadab and Abihu, Eleazar and Ithamar. And then lastly, 1 Chronicles 6, verse 3. 1 Chronicles 6:3. The children of Amram were Aaron, Moses, and Miriam, and the sons of Aaron were Nadab, Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithamar. So that's all those folks. Let's see here. Oh, that is a very good stopping place for us. So we can mark this right here. And notice Eleazar isn't under the baby boy death decree that Moses was. That was during that time frame and is now passed, but they are still enslaved. So they're dealing with that. So before we pick up with these last 20 years before the Exodus next week, any reactions to any of the stuff, any thoughts, observations, or questions as we've looked at the state of things as the Lord is building things up and preparing for the call of Moses from the burning bush? All good? All right, we'll go ahead and stop our recording here, stop our share, and get ready to have our song start.